It's Wednesday, May 21st. I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast. It is a hell of a day to talk ball, and join me to do just that is Andy Behrens. Andy, what's going on, buddy?
Hell of a day to talk ball. Any day that I'm not talking NFL schedule release is a hell of a day to talk ball. I'm looking forward to it. We got a lot to get to today. We got a lot of names in this outline.
We do have a lot of names to get to in this outline. I do just want to say, Behrens back-to-back on the podcast in the middle of the thick of the off season in May. I'm blessed. I'm touched by the gesture, and I'm very excited for this show today. Because like I said, it's May. Memorial Day weekend is this weekend, which is the official, unofficial, start to the summer. I think it is truly the official start to the summer. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can already see that I'm building up my nice base. I can't really call it a tan. It's just like a darker shade of pink. One of my cousins who we look quite alike, other than the fact that he has a long, glorious beard and I've just got this little thing going. He basically says we just look like first day of vacation pretty much all throughout the summer. People are like, oh, you rocking a sunburn? No, I'm not burnt. This is just the complexion. But anyways, it's the official start of summer. And yes, summer means outside time. It means, going to the beach. It means being by the pool. But what it also means is fantasy football season is really up and it's going here. As Scott said last week on the show, this is the start of fantasy football season. And I think what we got to do here is identify 15 ADPs to watch this vacation season. So yes, while you're at the pool, while you're on your vacations, you're also sneaking a look at the phone. Maybe you're doing some best ball drafts, Andy. Maybe you're seeing what people are talking about on Twitter. And we're going to pick out 15 ADPs today that we think might have a chance to go maybe up based on what happens in the next few months, maybe down as well. Just some things, no takes here, Andy, nothing in pen, just maybe some players that we are monitoring this summer.
That's why I keep signing up for the podcast in the off season. I love that I don't have to have bang the table takes about all this stuff, right? We're still getting this game figured out. We don't have to have answers just yet. I can still have huge swings in my ranks, right? Almost everybody that we're talking about today, I can make a case for them. I don't know, but 4 or 5 spots in the position ranks higher, 4 or 5 spots lower. These are not all of them are necessarily range of outcome guys, but some of them are. These are, I feel like we're talking about some situations and some players that are going to really produce some very right answers in fantasy football this year and perhaps some very wrong answers too.
Right. And whether they are right or wrong answers ultimately is going to come down to really the expectations and where you draft those guys. And several of these potential hype bunnies, they could be up there. They could be, they're nice best ball values right now. That's great. By the time we're drafting in August, they're no longer, you're paying sticker price. Okay. You're drafting at the ceiling. And I think a great player to talk about that is the first one we have here. We are going to do, just for table setting, we're going to do 5 quarterbacks, 5 running backs, and 5 wide receivers / wide receiver rooms and sort of try to monitor these ADPs. Might go up, might go down. But let's get to our first quarterback here. Some of these that we're going to talk about today are from an article that I wrote for the website that's already up. People can check that out. Some of them are ones, I believe, Andy, that you picked, you brought to the table, which, no shock, I believe this first player, if this wasn't a producer Colin nomination, it seems like it might have been yours. Caleb Williams, quarterback, Chicago Bears. Right now, his expert consensus rankings quarterback 12. Here at Yahoo, we're actually as a group much lower, and I think that's sort of again where he ends up following here in the summer. That's going to be interesting to track. So, Andy, Caleb Williams, what are we looking for this summer? Where might he end up going versus where he is going right now?
Yeah, 12 feels so aggressive to me based on, there's a lot of hope in that, right? There's a lot of speculation, a lot of projection, a lot of hope in that. And I get that that's the nature of the job, but man, he did not play to that rank last season. Obviously, things are better. We think things are better. We hope things are better, right? The coaching has to be better. Much has been said about that over the last year and in the last couple of weeks. Offensive line certainly seems better. Receiving core is at least deep, if not better. Like everything is trending the right direction. He simply can't take the level of abuse that he took last year, right? Like it's really difficult to imagine a player making it through consecutive seasons healthy if he's in line for another 50 plus sacks, 60 sacks. I don't think that's going to happen. I think the protection is better. Again, I think the quality of coaching is going to be orders of magnitude better. This is also a player where we are going to be vulnerable to, and listen, this is going to be the story of this podcast. We're going to be susceptible to training camp clips, right? We're gonna see some of those with Caleb Williams, and whether it's Dunze, whether it's DJ Moore, whether it's Burden. We're going to talk about this receiving core a little bit later too. It's just so many variables here, but I think I'm going to be vulnerable to it, and I think a lot of people in the fantasy community are going to be vulnerable to, steps forward, evidence of steps forward from this passing game and from this quarterback. Obviously, Caleb's got a rushing element to his game that maybe surprised some people. I think another 400 rushing yards is definitely in play. He actually was kind of unlucky in terms of rushing touchdowns last year. I wouldn't surprise me if Caleb settles in the early part of his career as somebody who's just giving us 400 rushing yards and 4 or 5 rushing scores each season. He had a couple called back last year. I think that's, and that's obviously the key to finishing as, even in a good, not great season, that's the key to finishing as like a top 8 fantasy quarterback, cracking the top 10 solidly. So I think Caleb's, but he's got some proving to do. He's got to show some work before I'm actually ready to give him the top 12 QB rank that the rest of the industry seems to have done already.
Yeah, I'm also with you there. I have him at quarterback 16 right now. Not that he's in a tier of guys that I'm eager to draft. A couple of them we're going to talk about here pretty soon. Certainly, if it's a super flex situation, like I've been in a couple super flex drafts and I've taken him as my second quarterback. I like that. But yeah, to kind of just stamp him into that top 12 is a little aggressive, especially because, like you mentioned, the rushing ability. He's certainly better as a rusher than Jared Goff or whatever, right? But if you're not going to be, like Sam Darnold last year, 212 rushing yards, 1 touchdown. He's the QB9 in fantasy because he was a prolific passer. And I think that's just the question that we have to ask ourselves. Like if Caleb Williams is going to be, something of like a 400 to 500 yard rusher. Now Bo Nix, right? He was a 430 yard rusher with 4 touchdowns. As you mentioned, he gets a little luckier there. He was QB7 while, having 29 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. I think that's possible for Caleb. I guess really just your overall ability or your overall view of his rushing ability, I think is pretty critical to just saying let's wave him into the top 12 quarterbacks.
He's also a little bit of a problematic rusher because he got rocked a few times last season. Like how many games did Caleb finish where he had like a stop the fight expression on his face, right? And he was just battered. Happened early, it happened late, it happened in wins. He just took a level of punishment that I don't think is sustainable, and obviously isn't healthy for any young quarterback. So that's a concern as well. This isn't like Jaden Daniels had a great rushing season. He stepped out of bounds a lot and he avoided big hits. And we thought that was going to be a worry with Daniels, but it was a huge concern for Caleb. Like Caleb got rocked on a lot of runs, and that has to end.
Yeah, I think just looking at some of the quarterbacks that are ranked ahead of him for us at Yahoo between 12, who is Justin Herbert, Brock Purdy, Dak Prescott, Jordan Love, Drake Maye, and then you get to Caleb Williams at 17. I'm very open to him passing some of those guys or him finishing ahead of those players. It just really, again, like where he ends up going in drafts is going to be very determined by some of those training camp clips and some of the hype reports that your Bears always get in the offseason, Andy. But look, I'm more willing to buy into it this year than maybe ever before. So we'll see how his ADP tracks over the next few months. Let's move to a guy I did write up in the article, and I feel like, God, I've talked about this player like way too much recently. But it's Justin Fields, quarterback of the New York Jets, who expert consensus ranking right now over at Fantasy Pros is QB 14. We're higher on that. We're higher at QB 11 right now. The range is 8 to 15. I was ready to say like, oh, Dalton, that's definitely Dalton Del Don at QB8. It's actually Scott. It's actually Scott who's one spot ahead of Dalton, who has him at QB9. So Dalton, step up your game, bro. What's going on here? Look, I'm really open to Fields being a potential top 12 quarterback as well, Andy, because of the rushing ability, all the things that we know. Yeah. And it seems like he should hold on to this job. So I think I can't really get a read on where he might go in the summer, Andy, but just because like I don't want to say like the term casual draft, our casual drafters, like people who just tune into fantasy football in August, are they really going to be like, yeah, I'm drafting Justin Fields as QB11? Like, is that really a thing that's going to happen? Or will he settle more around like the 14-15 range?
I don't think he's going to settle at 14-15, honestly. And I'm saying this without knowing exactly where I have him in the QB ranks right now. And I'm a little nervous about that, but he, in a healthy
10.
season,
you have him at 10. You have him at 10. I'm actually the low
good.
guy at 15, which I feel kind of stupid about. Like that's something I got to move up a little bit.
Like I feel if you want to bake in this idea that, I don't know, maybe Fields presents more injury risk than other quarterbacks, I'll listen to it. He's another guy who's taken some big hits over the years, but man, like in a healthy season, there's almost no way that he finishes as QB14. If you give me 17 games from Justin Fields, I know I'm getting a top 8 quarterback. He already has 1,000 rushing yard season, right? Like he's already checked that box. I thought he made substantial meaningful improvements last year, and argument can be made that he should have held the job in Pittsburgh, right? He started out 4-2. He was able to support George Pickens early in the season, right? Like nobody was complaining about Pickens for those first 6 weeks. I think he was a little touchdown challenged, but the numbers were there otherwise. Fields reduced the sack rate. He only threw 1 interception, right? Like these are all good things. These are things that we had not seen from Fields early in his career. Little loose with the football still when it's time to run. It's kind of the I don't know, as a Bears fan, it always made you anxious, obviously. Like when Justin Fields decides to tuck the ball and run, you have big play potential for both the offense and defense, right? Like ball security is definitely an issue here, but also he can take anything to the house. And he like early in his the first couple seasons, just absolutely sensational rushing ability showcased. And I don't know that he wants to do it. Like when you listen to him actually speak about how he wants to play quarterback, I don't always think, oh man, this is a guy who wants 10, 12 rush attempts per game. So I don't think he comes in at 1,000 yards again, but man, this guy's so fluid that I think he can accidentally finish with 750, 800 rushing yards in a healthy season. And it's just really like once you're there, once you're a guy who's giving us 700 rushing yards and like 6-8 rushing scores, there's just no way that you're finishing outside the top 8 quarterbacks.
No, it's a really good point. And to speak to the, does he want to play this way? I'm sure I've told this story on the podcast before, but I will never forget when we had him on Eckler's Edge at the Super Bowl. This was the Phoenix Super Bowl. So I think that was the first Eagles Chiefs game. And that was coming off the year where he ran for 1,000 yards and Austin Eckler is obviously, he's never run for 1,000 yards in his career. And he was like, yep, there's only 1,000 yard rusher on this set right now. And it's not me. And obviously I was like, well, it's not me either. And Justin, I mean, he pops in like later on in the show, he pops in with like, man, I hope I don't have to do that again. Basically, you're like kind of like you felt the exhaustion of that season. You felt the wear and tear on his body of that season just from like his expression. So yeah, I'm sure he doesn't want to play that way, but I do think a big part of why he's on this Jets team is because he used to give Aaron Glenn so many fits as a rushing quarterback against his man coverage heavy defense. I think that's a big part. I do think he's going to be a huge asset in the run game for them. I really think the question just again is like his passing ceiling in this offense. Like, something around the projection of 16 touchdowns, like just sub 3,000 yards. You're probably going to want a little bit more than that, and that really just depends on his connection with Garrett Wilson. But I do think that Andy, for the first time probably since Lamar Jackson's first full year as a starter, I think Fields gives us the best chance to be like a true double-digit round pick that has real deal like rushing advantage fantasy winning sort of potential. I think this is probably the first guy that we've seen fit that bill in a while. I guess maybe Jaden Daniels last year, but I'm talking about like a non-rookie that sort of fits that bill.
And that's the description. Like when a quarterback becomes sort of a golden ticket player in fantasy, that's how it happens, right? He's the guy that you were actually able to draft outside the top 10 at the position. I mean, it's if Lamar Jackson is going to be a golden ticket player in fantasy, like he's really it better be a historic season, because we're already paying a 3rd round price. We're already paying a 4th round price. Like there's a real opportunity cost to taking Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts Jaden Daniels at the top of the draft. They're not cheap anymore. But when you think about the season in which Lamar Jackson, really broke out, carried people to fantasy titles, we were drafting him at like QB 10, QB 11, QB 12. He was not an afterthought, but he wasn't a proactive pick necessarily for anyone. And that's what gave you the massive positional edge. And I think Fields is one of those guys who offers that this year. And if he's really going to stick around QB 14, again, that's just not going to happen if he plays 16 or 17 games. He's going to finish much higher than this.
Yeah, like I said, I feel like I've been talking about Fields a lot on this podcast and other places lately. Probably going to continue to talk about him a lot because, full disclosure, I feel like I have been on the wrong side of the quarterback reclamation projects pretty much every single time. Like Mayfield, Darnold was on the wrong side of history on those debates. And I've always been a Field skeptic. So I'm trying to be pretty open-minded to him being successful in New York, even if it's not quite to the degree of, Sam Darnold or certainly Baker Mayfield, who's now like the entrenched starter for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I don't know if that's going to happen for Fields, but I do think obviously he can be a fantasy winner. That is for sure. Let's go to the next quarterback here that you've got, Andy, which is Dak Prescott. Quarterback, Dallas Cowboys. Current expert consensus rank is QB 16. At Yahoo, we're kind of in line with that. Quarterback 14. Is he somebody that you could see rising or maybe falling throughout the proceedings? I'll say just again before I toss to you, I'm the low guy on Dak because I kind of struggle to see the fantasy upside, but I feel like you're on the other side of that debate here.
Yeah, I think it's fair with Dak to say that you're going to bury him in the ranks a little bit because you don't see a path for him to finish whatever, top 4, top 5, right? I think that might be fair. Like we know that every season there'll be like one guy, it happened for Geno. It happens, it happens occasionally. It happens almost every year where like somebody just ends up finishing as a top 5 quarterback and it doesn't feel quite right, but it's because they played 17 games and all those games were pretty good. And Dak has that potential. He has zero potential to finish as the QB1 overall. And that's the kind of thing that maybe you should take swings at. So I understand not having him in the top 10, but this is another guy where like, as a practical matter, if we get 16 or 17 games out of Dak, I think it's going to be pretty difficult for him to not finish top 10, top 12. He's just 1 year removed from an MVP runner-up finish. He's just 1 year removed from leading the league in touchdown passes and finishing as like the QB3. There is clear potential. We need CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens to stay mostly healthy throughout the season. And he's gonna cruise to like 4,300, 4,400 passing yards, probably 30 passing touchdowns. Like that's, I don't know. You can just about pencil that in. So I'm a little bit surprised at how bearish we seem in terms of pre-rank and ADP right now. But I also do want to understand. I want to acknowledge the fact that there's almost no chance that Dak is gonna finish like top 1, top 2 at the position. I don't think that's gonna happen. But can he sneak into the top 5 off a healthy season? I think that is definitely in play.
Right. It's just a little difficult to rank quarterbacks this year because I think the tier that he is in contains a lot of guys that I can easily see him passing up, like a Jordan Love or something like that. Even Brock Purdy. Like you can tell me that Dak Prescott outscores Brock Purdy this year, and I wouldn't be too surprised, even though I've got Purdy ranked higher. But then there's also like the Caleb Williamses and Justin Fields and the next player that we're talking about, where their ability, I think, to potentially sneak into the top 5, even if their floor is lower than a Dak Prescott, I think again it's that is higher. So dealing with sort of that like that variance there, and sort of it's hard to square that, at least to me. I will say from the like ADP standpoint, Andy, like where this ends up settling, this is a George Pickens question to me too, even though we're not going to talk about Pickens in the wide receiver segment, because like Pickens is a training camp highlight reel waiting to happen, and especially in friggin' Dallas, bro. Everybody's going to be filming his, one-handed contested catches, some of these back shoulders, the tight covered stop routes and things of that nature. Like that's going to be all over your timeline in August. And I think if Pickens becomes a rising tide, he's taking the Dak Prescott boat up the ADP range with him.
No, it's a really good point. And to an earlier point that you made when discussing Dak, I do think it's fair. Again, like you should, in a one quarterback league, if you're playing like, I don't know, 95% of all fantasy leagues are like, 10 teams, 12 teams, you're only using one quarterback. They're not, these exotic settings that we sometimes talk about. If you're playing in that format, you should just always take the guy that you think has even if it's a small chance, but like a real chance to finish as the QB1 overall and be kind of a game breaker, right? Like you should just take big swings at this position. It didn't really burn anybody to take Anthony Richardson last year. I know plenty of people who like still had really strong fantasy seasons, even though Anthony Richardson was bust, because you could replace him. You replaced him with Baker Mayfield almost immediately, right? Like the guys, one quarterback league, again, if there's only 10 or 12 teams, we talked about this in the mock draft podcast, right? There's just too many quarterbacks to go around. You're going to be able to fix this position somehow, even if you miss on it at the draft.
One player I'm very excited to see where he ends up settling in an ADP range, because I want to draft this guy. I want to be high on this guy, and that is New England Patriots quarterback Drake Maye. Andy, extra consensus is QB 18 on Drake Maye right now. We're slightly higher than that, QB 16 here at Yahoo, with a range of 13 to 18 on Drake Maye. This is Dalton is the highest on Drake Maye, but I'm only one spot behind him. You're the low guy on Drake Maye. I got to throw Drake Maye to you with this stat, Andy, because I think his ability as a rushing quarterback is sort of going understated right now. Like that potential upside there that is waiting to be mined there for him. Again, this is somebody I wrote up for the website. So Drake Maye last year, number one, 3.81 yards after contact per rush attempt, was second most in the NFL behind Baker Mayfield, which is a stat I believe I told you last week. But here's the crazy part about his rushing last season. Drake Maye had 421 rushing yards last year. 407 of those came on scrambles. 97% of his rushing yards came as a scrambler because they so rarely used him as a designed rusher. I don't know what the split is going to look like this year. I will take the under on 97% of his rushing yards being from scrambles, because number one, I just think that coaching staff was a complete mess last year. I also think they were totally afraid of getting Drake Maye injured in that nightmare situation, especially because they got some flack for like, how could you start him against the Texans in his first start? Oh no, like he's behind that offensive line against those pass rushers. Like that was a big storyline. So I think that coaching staff just really overthought a lot of things. So then again, he was never used as a designed rusher. Maye has already talked about this, that he's looked at some of those old Cam Newton 2020 Patriots games, where Josh McDaniels kind of had Cam Newton, what was left of him, cooking as a designed rusher. So I'm very excited about Drake Maye this year. But I don't have a good sense of where he might end up going, because I don't think the Patriots will be one of these hype bunny teams like the Bears or, I don't think his rushing upside will be as overstated as it is with a guy like Justin Fields. So where do you think he might end up slotting in drafts, and is he somebody you're interested in targeting this year?
This is funny because you started exactly where I was going to start, which is with the idea that, like, man, if Drake Maye was a proactive runner this year, it would make all the difference in terms of his fantasy appeal. And if we just get if we get little nuggets about that, the potential of that, hey, let's give Drake Maye 5, 6, 7, designed rush attempts per game. That'd change the math. That'd change a lot of things. Because last season, if you give him a full 17 games, it's something like 550 rushing yards. He averaged 7.8 yards per carry. He's great at it. This is definitely a player who, if we're making it a recurring part of the offense, he could easily rush for 750 yards, 800 yards. I think he's the numbers look similar to Caleb Williams last year in terms of just a total rushing output. He's a better runner than Caleb, and I think Caleb is like crafty and smart and picks his spots really well. But Drake Maye is better, a much stronger rushing threat than Caleb Williams. So I think he could almost double him up. So that's the ceiling. There is a floor here though that also involves, he didn't get the scrutiny that Caleb did last year, and that's understandable. Caleb was the number 1 overall pick, but Drake Maye did miss some throws last year. It wasn't perfect as a passer. We also have a receiving core that just on paper, maybe it's not as good as that Bears. I don't even know why I'm talking about him next to Caleb. It's just that I have him parked next to Caleb in the ranks, and I think they should appropriately belong to the same tier right now. I feel not quite as strong about the New England receiving core, although I get the appeal. There's certainly a world in which Kyle Williams outperforms anybody's 50th percentile expectation here, and becomes fantasy relevant right away. There's certainly a world where Steph Diggs is ready to go right away and looks a little bit like at least last year's version of Steph Diggs. That would make Drake Maye really appealing. If we could just get Drake Maye to 3,500 passing yards and he's a proactive rusher, now he's got top 10 appeal. I think you're right. It's not gonna be quite as buzzy as there's gonna be maybe a little bit more national attention paid to the Bears offense. So many new things, but there's a lot of new things in New England as well. And it's hard not to like what they did for him in the offseason.
Yeah, hard not to like it, even if it is still a work in progress on the offensive side of the football. And you had a lot of if statements about the receivers, and but that's where upside is. It's in those if statements. So I'm very excited about Drake Maye. Everybody is excited about this next quarterback's offense. Everybody's excited about his new play calling head coach in Liam Cohen. Yep. Everybody is excited about Brian Thomas Jr. heading into his second season. Everybody is excited about Travis Hunter, who's ticking up the fantasy rankings as he should be. And yet nobody seems to care about the guy who's supposed to distribute the football in this offense and to these wide receivers, except one person, Andy Behrens, and that person is you, Trevor Lawrence, who is consensus ranked QB 19. You have him at 12. You have him at 12 this year. I'm the low guy on Lawrence. And again, I think when I probably go through and do projections, I bet the math won't math that way, Andy, and I'll probably end up ticking him up. But make the case for Trevor Lawrence. And do you think that there could be enough excitement about this Jaguars team that maybe consensus sort of starts to catch up from an ADP standpoint to where you have him ranked?
Yeah, this is one of those cases where understandably, people have been frustrated with Trevor Lawrence over the last couple of years. I totally get it. I do just want to remind people, I've got him ranked at a place that he's finished. He's been the QB 12. He has a QB 12 finish on the resume. He's got a QB 7 finish on the resume for fantasy, right? So it's not like he hasn't done this. And now he's coming into a season in which I thought we were all pretty bullish on Liam Cohen. I thought we all liked the design of this offense or what we think it's going to look like. He's got, Brian Thomas, who's ranked as among the wide receiver ones. He's got Travis Hunter, who's about the most exciting rookie wide receiver in this class. This is an incredible setup. This is an absolutely incredible setup. And it's not like Trevor Lawrence doesn't have any rushing upside. I mean, I think he could do more than what he's done. And I think they should allow him, in the same way that we're talking about Drake Maye being a proactive runner. I don't think Trevor Lawrence is there necessarily, but it was a huge element of his game as a college quarterback. He's great at it. I don't think he's a bad runner at all. He's somebody who could give us 500, 550 rushing yards, 5-6 touchdowns. I think he's settled in as somebody where they probably want it to be more like 300, 350, maybe it's 3 or 4 touchdowns, but there is a real rushing element to his game. It's not like he's completely excluded from the dual threat club. So he's got a little bit of that. And again, he's got two receivers that we're so excited about. Those receivers on their own might get us to 2,500 passing yards. Sure. Trevor's also he's just 25 years old. We talked about it on the last podcast. He is the same age as Bo Nix right now. This is not an old quarterback that, you know, I feel like this is not a direct comparison of two players by any means, but like and this is also me showing my age, but I've been talking fantasy for a really long time at Yahoo. And I remember the early days of Matthew Stafford, right? Like when Matt Stafford was Trevor Lawrence's age, when he was like 25, 26 years old, we stone cold knew what he was. Like everybody had their, like, it was fixed. We all had fixed, firm opinions on what Matthew Stafford was. And he was, I don't know, he was a Jameis-like quarterback who only got his numbers off of volume, and he was only ever going to complete 57, 58% of his throws. And listen, if you let him throw the ball 700 times, he's definitely throwing 18, 20 picks. Like, we knew who he was. He was a product of Calvin Johnson and volume. And like, I don't know, he had 12 more years left, right? And now Matthew Stafford's going to the Hall of Fame. He's going to be a 60,000 yard quarterback. He's got a Super Bowl. We don't, like, I know that people feel like they know exactly who Trevor Lawrence is and what the next 10 years of Trevor Lawrence is going to look like, but I'm telling you, you don't. Like, he's still young, still developing, and a huge talent.
I mean, it's a good case. And I wouldn't say I'm a Trevor skeptic, but I've never been like kind of as high on him as some people who opinion I really respect about quarterbacks like Nate's, Derek Klassen have always been like really high. Like, oh, this guy has already proven himself to be like a top 10 quarterback in the league. I've never been quite there, but I'm also not really a skeptic either. And generally, like, my natural contrarianism wants to kick in as you're saying, like, hey, we think we know who Trevor Lawrence is, but we get this wrong with quarterbacks all the time. Even, again, more recent examples, the Bakers, the Sam Darnolds, and it just, like, when you get to the right destination, that can really be what fulfills your destiny as a quarterback. So I want to be open to, and because I do believe all those things I said at the top, that I am in on Liam Cohen, that I am in on these two receivers, I should be a little more open and optimistic to Trevor than maybe I am right now from a rankings perspective. But I wonder if he could be that quarterback this year that, again, just from a math standpoint, like, your rankings for these receivers versus him just don't line up, and ADP never catches up, and he ends up being a pretty decent value because of that. So I like including Trevor Lawrence in this exercise here. All right, we're going to take our first break. We come back. We're going to talk through 5 running backs whose ADPs we are going to watch right after this. All right, we are back. Let's talk through 5 running backs here, and I believe these are actually all from my article here. So let's talk through Kenneth Walker, who I want to include first here, Andy, because, look, I just with the way consensus rankings see it right now, he is running back 16. To be clear, we're in line with that here at Yahoo. But his teammate, Zach Charbonnet, is buried at running back 36. Walker is sandwiched between guys like Joe Mixon and Alvin Kamara. And it's interesting because I think the whole argument behind Kenneth Walker is, well, they hired Clint Kubiak. He's going to really come in and improve the run game, which this run game has been terrible in Seattle. Over the last 3 seasons combined, they've been 26th in rushing success rate. Kubiak, with a banged up, offensive line that was filled with a lot of youth last year in New Orleans, they were 13th, and they were trending better than that when they were healthy. So, like, I'm on board with that idea. Where I'm just a little skeptical is that, like, oh, that's all just going to Kenneth Walker? And I think the argument, Andy, is that previous staffs have defaulted to Walker as the starter when he's been healthy. But this is a new group, and Charbonnet finished the season strong. And, like, even if you look at fantasy points data, both of these guys actually have higher success rates on gap runs than zone concepts, which is what Kubiak leans into. And there's not a discernible difference in 2024 or 2023. So I don't even know that, like, oh yeah, well, actually it's Kenneth Walker because he's the clear scheme fit. So I don't know. Talk me through this a little bit. Like, is he somebody whose ADP could actually come down a little because in the summer it's like, actually Zach Charbonnet taking a bunch of reps with the first team, or am I just completely making up a story here?
I'd be shocked if his ADP comes down because, and some of this is in no way related to anything that you've said. It's mostly about, like, I don't know. You listen to the Best Ball Bros right now. they're salivating over Kenneth Walker because he's got Carolina in week 17, right? Like they're already talking about the end of the season as if we know what Carolina is going to be in week 17, as if we know what Kenneth Walker is going to be in week 17, as if we can possibly know any of that. Of course we can't. And yet that's the game. You gotta take your shots at the end of the season. You really do have to evaluate some of that. So I feel like end of season matchup alone is going to keep him pretty high, but I am with you on the notion that these guys are going to be vying for the attention of a new decision maker. It's not settled at all. I think Walker is pretty clearly the most explosive player. Like the one game he had last year in which he was healthy, it was 20 carries and 100 plus yards, and he found the end zone. And like he's a bit more of a, he's sort of always seeking the big play, where Zach Charbonnet is going to hit a lot of singles and doubles for you. I don't know why I'm using a baseball analogy. It's freaking football. I can use football analogies. But like Charbonnet and Walker are somewhat different players. Charbonnet's got a full skill set though, and I don't think he just disappears. Even a couple years ago, like we were seeing the snap counts were very close between these two guys, even if the touch totals weren't necessarily. And I think the touch totals could even out a little bit. I don't think anybody should go into drafts absolutely secure in the idea that Kenneth Walker is the clear RB1 and there's an obvious hierarchy here.
Yeah, just a summer story to track. I might be completely off base, and it is just Walker, who has been straight up the more productive player. He was 12th in points per game last year among running backs. When he's been on the field, he's always been productive, even if the efficiency, the success rate's not always there. He's hit those home runs, as you mentioned. And look, if he fits into this offense, he's going to hit a lot of home runs. Okay. So like I get the appeal, but just again, the rotation in training camp is a story to monitor, maybe more than early rankings suggest. Let me tell you a player who everybody's going to be salivating over this summer. That's RJ Harvey, running back Denver Broncos. Running back 26 in consensus rankings right now. We're actually, I love the way our Yahoo rankings actually have RJ Harvey settled out here because it's so predictable. The low man is Scott Pianowski, at running back 30, which I'm sure Scott will tell you that's going to come up over the summer, whatever. But he's running back 30 for Scott. And Dalton, of course, is the high guy at running back 16. And you and I are kind of the centrists in the situation there, sort of in the middle. I just there's no way, Andy, there's a 0% chance he is running back 26 by the end of August. I don't know what I can say. Like, I'll eat this microphone if he's running back 26 and he hasn't been injured at some point in the summer. Just no shot that's going to happen.
Yeah, first of all, those ranks are super instructive as to how each of the Yahoo experts approach the task of ranking players generally. And to Dalton's credit, man, if Dalton likes somebody, he's all in, and it is clearly expressed in the ranks. Right, that's one of the things that I appreciate most about him. Experts across the industry are experts, whatever we call ourselves, analysts across the industry, already lining up to declare that they loved Harvey before it was cool to love Harvey, before he was a member of the Broncos. Everybody wants to have been first on this. I think we all see the upside. It's obviously a really good offensive line. It is an ascending offense generally. It is a team with just a screaming need for rushing talent because they just simply didn't get enough out of Javonte last year. The thing that I feel like people haven't accounted for, and listen, Sean Payton offenses have produced incredible running backs, right? Like we've seen a bunch of great fantasy seasons, terrific fantasy, single game performances out of Sean Payton running backs. Alvin Kamara still hasn't rushed for 1,000 yards in a season. Reggie Bush had to leave New Orleans to rush for 1,000 yards. Like I don't think people should assume that just because the backfield was pretty bad last year that RJ Harvey is gonna step into all of the work. I'd be shocked if that happens. It is just not what we've seen from Payton over the better part of 2 decades. So, you're going to be annoyed by Jaleel McLaughlin. You're going to be annoyed by Estime. You're these things are just going to happen. You're probably not getting 375 or 400 touches out of RJ Harvey, and you're going to have to live with that. Now, he's plenty explosive. And again, is a great offense, so he can be really good. And Dalton's probably right about like what his best case scenario is coming into the season. I think that's probably right. There's more of a chance that he exists in a committee arrangement, I think, than people are willing to admit right now.
Yeah, and I don't really know that there's going to be like indications of that all throughout the summer, maybe training camp reports, things of that nature. But like in the article that I wrote for the site, I included a link to Twitter, twitter.com/search RJ Harvey, Bucky Irving, and there's like a bajillion tweets in there. Yeah. I mean, it's worth it alone. Just go to the article and give me the click, baby. We're keep the lights on. But just to check out that link alone, because it's a rich text of every draft and fantasy analyst clinging onto that comparison. And like that alone, I just feel like he's going to end up going inside the top 20 running backs. Like that alone. And then I think if there's enough training camp buzz and maybe it's not a committee, like that steam could go even higher.
Yeah, this is definitely one where I kind of feel like there's just always going to be somebody in a draft. Some of this is the fact that we get in so many industry drafts, but there's always going to be somebody in a draft that loves Harvey more than I do. And I actually think, like I wrote about this a couple weeks ago, I think that moment where we have to decide who the first rookie running back is off the board other than Ashton Genty, I think that's probably one of the big swing picks in drafts. And for a lot of people, that's going to be Harvey. I've currently got Caleb Johnson there. I think you can pretty much pencil a healthy Caleb Johnson into 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns. But maybe I'm just on Caleb Island. I don't know. But I think that choice for the maybe that's aggressive. But
how many
touchdowns
feel like the Steelers averaged the last few years? Like 12? I don't know.
Don't hit me with math right now. I'm in a good Caleb zone. Yeah, I feel like that choice is going to be something that swings leagues.
Yeah, I think that is very true. Okay, boring couple running backs here next, starting with Tyrone Tracy, New York Giants. I'll just throw it to you this way, Andy. I don't think anybody's I'm super gassed up about Tyrone Tracy like they are about RJ Harvey, but anytime we can get a starting running back for an NFL team late in drafts, like we're interested in that, even if it is for the damn New York Giants, who I think could be better on offense this year than maybe that little flippant tone indicated, even if I'm not super, super high on the Giants as a team. But again, he's running back 31 right now. The new rookie, Cam Scatabo, is running back 41. I think the exercise we're going through here today, like where will these ADPs shift? That's what we need to find out over the next few months. Like, is that gap large enough between Tracy and Scatabo at 31 and 41? Or does it actually need to get maybe a little bit tighter? And those are the sort of clues we'll be looking for, because I don't know that there should be a lean one way or another right now.
I thought that Tracy, particularly early in the season last year, I thought he was fantastic. I do think that he was on fumes a little bit at the end of the year. I think,
sure,
whatever. It's your first NFL season. You've only recently converted to the position, right? Like it's understandable that he wasn't at his absolute best in the closing weeks. Got a little more fumbly than you'd like to see late in the season and mid-season as well. So those are problems. I also think there's almost no chance that this backfield, they decide to give it all to Scatabo. First of all, he wasn't really drafted in a range where you would expect anybody to become a full workload running back. I don't think that's happening at all. Not to say that people are predicting it, but I thought that Tracy definitely did enough so that there's no way that guy, when healthy, isn't getting, 45 to 55% of the snaps all the time. He's such a versatile weapon, and that might end up being the best way to use this player, right? Like it's a short list of guys who actually get better when you give them 20 touches, when you give them 25 touches. It could very well be that the best use of Tyrone Tracy is we're going to limit you to 13 to 16 touches per game, and you are going to be at your absolute best on all of those.
Next guy I want to talk about here is Jordan Mason, Minnesota Vikings running back. Consensus ranking right now is 37, which is actually higher than when I wrote the article when he was running back 40. It's a big gap between him and Aaron Jones at running back 22. And look, I think Jones should be ranked higher, but I wonder if that gap needs to be tighter, Andy, because like Jordan Mason last year, weeks 1 to 7, was second in the NFL in rushing yards, behind only Derrick Henry. And I think when you look at why they went out to get Jordan Mason, the Minnesota Vikings did, because this has been a very zone-heavy run game. It's been kind of a one-note rushing game under Kevin O'Connell's tenure there. And it started off pretty well with Aaron Jones last year, but then, of course, it faded with injuries. And you just look at what they did in the offseason. They added a bunch of beef. Ryan Kelly, Will Fries, Donovan Jackson, fixed the interior of that offensive line. And Jordan Mason last year had 5.95 yards per carry on gap scheme runs. I kind of think Jordan Mason might be key to what seems like the desired evolution of the run game here in Minnesota. So, Again, he's somebody that, depending on like training camp usage and stuff like that, I could certainly see coming up from his current consensus rank.
Yeah, this is one where I think you've just kind of exposed a problem in the ranks, and he's a near lock to come up, because people are going to remember that Jordan Mason for like a month and a half was the absolute right answer in fantasy, and you were until the point that his injury hit. He was a week winner for you, and he was somebody who was going to be able to ride a great situation and pretty significant talent to an absolutely huge season. Like, he was going to cruise to, I don't know, 1,300 rushing yards, something like that. He looked awesome. And there were more touchdowns ahead for him as well. So like, he looked great. There should absolutely not be whatever the gap is in the ranks between Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason is right now. It shouldn't be like that. Like, Aaron Jones is a very valuable player, and he's one of the best. Like, he's like a legit route running kind of running back too. I think he's a really gifted receiver, and we're gonna see that role for him throughout the year. But man, Jordan Mason is a really good compliment, and there's no way that Jordan Mason is simply viewed as a straight backup, right? Or somebody that they're only going to give 6-8 touches to. Jordan Mason's really good. He proved it. And he should probably be, I don't know, 40% of the snaps and a whole bunch of touches. So yeah, I think this one gets corrected as draft season moves along.
Last running back I want to talk about is Bhayshul Tuten, rookie running back for the Jacksonville Jaguars out of Virginia Tech. Some things have happened since we updated, we decided to talk about this, and certainly since I wrote him up in the article. He is, again, just somebody that could certainly rise, consensus ranked running back 51, Andy, but Tuten's biggest problem in college was fumbling and injuries and fumbling. And apparently on one of his like first three, it's not his very first carry for the Jaguars in minicamp or whatever they're doing right now. He fumbled the football, which Liam Cohen's like, yeah, you don't really want to see that. But also Cohen has been very quick to be like, yeah, you can't really tell anything about what's going on right now. I know there's some people on fantasy Twitter that really think you can take a lot from whatever practices that the Jaguars are having right now. But Cohen's been very quick with anything he said to be like, yeah, you can't really tell much in this setting, which is kind of classic guys that come off of this Rams tree. But again, fantasy Twitter disagrees with you, Liam Cohen. But anyways, Bhayshul Tuten fumbling the ball this early in the offseason. Probably not what you want to see if he's somebody to monitor from an ADP perspective. Huge range on him in the rankings. I got to look at who's the culprit here. Running back 37 to running back 59 for Bhayshul Tuten with the Yahoo rankings right now. But again, I do think he's somebody to watch over the course of. God, I'm the one at 37. Jeez, unbelievable. That's embarrassing. I might have to bring old Bhayshul Tuten down if you can't hold on to the football.
I don't think there's a player right now. If you made me name, who are the guys with the greatest possible range of outcomes. Like at the high end, it's spectacular. At the low end, they never see the field. I think this guy is top of the list. Because again, like, but ball security being a major issue coming into the league, and then you put the ball on the ground on one of your first touches in minicamp. It's not good. It's not a like nail in the coffin situation or anything. He just got there, but it's not good. It's not a great first impression. He's also just like a superhero level athlete. Crazy combine performance. When healthy, the highlights are great. The tape is great. This is a yards after contact guy. This is a big play guy. Also, there's no way that team is interested in giving another 200 plus touches to ETN. I think they have something in Tank Bigsby. I thought Bigsby was really good, but also really limited last year. It is you can definitely, you don't even have to squint to see the future of that backfield as like a 2-man, Bhayshul, Tuten and Tank Bigsby situation where they really complement each other. And man, when we're rolling and we have a multi-score lead, it's Bigsby, and almost every other situation it's Tuten. Like that fits. That would seem like it works. So like at the high end here, Tuten could absolutely take over this backfield and be a 1,300-yard rusher. That's, I don't know. I can see it. I think he's that explosive. I think he's that good. But again, he can also be somebody who just absolutely never sees the field and better learn, to play special teams.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect way of describing how it could go. And one practice in freaking May does not determine that. So this is, again, a story to track over the course of the offseason. Again, it's just unfortunate that he's making headlines for a fumble when that was something that was a slight concern of his in college. So again, just a story to track over the course of the next few months. We're going to take our last break. We come back, we'll talk through some wide receivers whose ADP we are monitoring over the summer right after this. All right, Andy, it's time. We're talking wide receivers. We're talking some wide receiver rooms. And let's start with your Chicago Bears, because I think Ben Johnson's comments in the post-draft presser were so instructive. And to me, it makes me think that everybody's on a blank slate here. Everybody, fresh start for everybody, which is good and it's bad. Now, fantasy rankings don't see it that way. Because if you look at consensus fantasy rankings, at least at the time that I published the article last week, DJ Moore, clear-cut lead man here. He is the 39th ranked overall player in fantasy right now. Rome Odunze is 81st. Colson Loveland's 131st. Luther Burden is 137th. And Cole Kmet is 192nd. So fantasy rankers see it as DJ Moore, clear lead man here, which I think he's the favorite to lead the team in receiving and all of those things. But to view it as a certainty like that, I'm not sure that that's what happens. And I am very interested to see what transpires from what signals do we get out of camp and all those sort of things over the next few months.
Yeah, I think DJ Moore is pretty safe. And I think some of what goes into his rank is the fact that, we've seen him thrive in worse situations than this one. That guy has overcome. He's got the resume these other guys do not. Yeah. And they proactively, even under a terrible coaching staff, they found ways to get him the ball last year. And he's still a very productive player. I think the floor is highest with DJ Moore. I think Odunze is one of the most interesting names, and he's somebody who could swing in. Like, we're gonna get training camp clips where Caleb's got all day to throw because it's they're not allowed to hit him, right? And he fires it downfield to Rome Odunze, and it's it gets kind of buzzy on social, and people get excited about Rome Odunze all over again. I thought his season last year was really kind of a roller coaster. And I thought he unofficially led the league in plays where he was not in the spot that his quarterback expected him to be. And I can't tell you how often that was his responsibility and how often it was Caleb's responsibility. Certainly it was on Caleb a lot of the time. Caleb did not have, it wasn't exactly a quarterbacking clinic for the Bears last year. But man, those two have to get in sync. If they do get in sync, sky's the limit. There really are a lot of vacated targets here. That was before the Bears drafted Loveland, before they drafted Burden, that was the argument on behalf of Odunze, right? Is not only we think he's a really talented player and everybody liked him coming into the league, but also, man, all those Keenan Allen targets are gone. There's crazy opportunity here. That opportunity still exists. He's just got to. I don't think it's going to fall his way just because he was a top of the draft pick last year. I think he's got to earn it as well. So I think this you and I have talked a fair amount about the Ben Johnson comments and their potential effect on DJ Moore, who was visibly unhappy for a lot of last season and didn't play his best football. But man, I think Odunze's got a lot to prove.
Yeah, I think everybody here has to earn it. That was the whole point of the comments.
Yeah.
And, I think Yeah, it's not quite like the work ethic or the motivation questions with the Dunze. It's just being like his feel for zone coverage, I think, was an issue last year, like being in the spots where he's supposed to be, which, as you highlighted there, was definitely my biggest critique of him as a rookie and why I think he fits more as like the team's X receiver. Now that doesn't mean like, oh no, he's not going to play the Amon-Ra St. Brown role. Not good. Like that we watched Jamison Williams not play the Amon-Ra St. Brown role and be very good in this offense. And I don't think there is going to be like a clear cut this role, that role type thing. It's when we get to camp and we see the guys, in pads, like how are we crafting the offense around that? So yeah, he's definitely got to come in here and earn it. And I also think we've got to learn, is this going to be a 12 personnel based team, an 11 personnel based team? Because that will then also tell us about the sleeper appeal of a Colson Loveland or a Luther Burden, or if those guys have limited ceilings. So Bears wide receivers, Bears pass catchers in general, one of the bigger storylines I think to watch. And I agree with you. We're going to get a lot of camp. Like I've already seen like a Dunze to Caleb Williams to a Dunze target from, 7-on-7 or whatever the hell they're doing right now. So those are going to be on your timelines. And I do think they will move the market around, whether that is good or bad. That's going to happen. Really interested to see where, the quote market evaluates the 49ers wide receivers. Because right now, Andy, consensus ranking is basically just throwing their hands up at this group. Brandon Ayuk is wide receiver 40. Juwan Jennings is wide receiver 41. And Ricky Pearsall is wide receiver 42. Perfect. No notes. Love the hedge from the industry. Us at Yahoo, we're kind of in a we're in a pretty similar boat here. Ayuk is 41, Juwan Jennings is 39, and then Ricky Pearsall is wide receiver 45. So this is a group where I will predict some major movement here based on things that happen in the offseason, like Ayuk's health status, Pearsall training camp reports, Juwan Jennings, all that type of stuff. Like, I think there's going to be a lot of movement between this group. And another thing, Andy, that I am confident of, somebody is out shooting wide receiver 40. Okay. Somebody from this room is definitely going to outkick that. The industry does not seem to know where it is. What's your lean and like, what are we looking for clues wise in this wide receiver room?
I think that this is the most interesting group that we're maybe talking about in terms of like not just among the receivers, but like of everybody that we're talking about on the show, because I think there's probably a really right answer here, right? We saw last year, Juwan Jennings, when he went off, it was among the best single game performances that we saw all season. Totally reliable player. Like, Can Juwan Jennings have a 1,200-yard season? I definitely think that's possible. We're getting Ricky Pearsall in just a normal, healthy offseason. Yeah. Like he was great at the end of last year, and he had the wildest offseason and summer of any player in football, and it involved very little actual like on-field action, right? So like if we get him in just a normal, quiet developmental period throughout the summer, that like sky's the limit for that guy. That guy could be 1,000-yard receiver. I do think that Pearsall is probably the player where like the ADP moves the most, because this is a highlight player. Like this is somebody who's going to give us some camp clips where people are like, come on, how is that a human being doing that? Like I think he's capable of that. And that's the sort of thing that moves the needle in an irrational way during the summer. So I won't be surprised if Ricky Pearsall's ADP actually gets into, I don't know, like if you told me it was going to be like a wide receiver 28 by the time we're drafting for good, like I don't know, I can see that happening. Ayuk is such a difficult call, right? Because he's coming back from injury. We just don't know exactly what that is going to look like, and we don't know when it happens. It's probably not week one. I'm not ruling out that it would be week one, but it's probably not, immediately start of the season. So I think there's a little runway here for Jennings and Pearsall to both go off before Ayuk comes back necessarily. When Ayuk does come back, like he's going to earn targets too. That guy's great. But I feel like this group of three, whether it's Ayuk in the second half of the season or whether it's Jennings or Pearsall all year, somebody from this group is not just going to overshoot like wide receiver 40. Somebody in this group is going to finish like in the teens. They're going to bump up against the wide receiver ones. There's going to be a really, really right answer here. And it's somebody that you can take in the dead center of your draft, right? Like maybe even outside the top 100 overall picks.
Yeah, I think the right answer is to take shots on all of these guys right now as they're ranked in this range. Now, I think for Ricky Pearsall to get to wide receiver 28, that like fever dream that you outlined there, I do think that has to also come with some like pretty negative Brandon Ayuk, like, oh, he might start the season on the pup, or he's going to be super limited to start. I think that would probably have to happen, but that is within the range of outcomes. Like, that is totally within the range of outcomes. We don't know that right now as we sit here towards the end of May. But I do know this, like Ayuk in 2023, he was a top 10 receiver in the NFL. And like, that's being conservative. He was probably more like a top 6, 7, 8 wide receiver in the NFL. And if he can get back to anything close to that form, I think he runs away as the most important wide receiver in the room. But man, I'm really high on Ricky Pearsall. And I know, like, when I posted some clips about Ricky Pearsall, a few people joked in the comments, like, oh, the Juwan Jennings bros are going to come in here because some people like won't let you talk about Pearsall without being like, hey, Jennings was better last year. And like, that is true. Jennings was better last year, and he was the correct answer off the waiver wire and all those things. He also didn't get shot in August. That's an important variable here. But yeah, I really love the way Ricky Pearsall finished the season, and like an underrated second-year wide receiver in an offense that should just moonwalk into a top 10 finish. Like, that's the archetype of a player I certainly want to draft, especially because I like the player. But Jennings could easily be the right answer here too. So again, what we hear and see over the next few months is critical with this receiver room. I'm glad that you highlighted them as, probably one of the most interesting ones to track over the next few months. Marvin Harrison Jr., Andy, I don't know if you've seen this, but he's been eating his protein, been putting on the pounds. I don't know if you've been tracking this story, but my guy's out there wearing the cutoff shirts. He's letting the guns be seen, and hey, MHJ looks good. And usually I'm not out here like, okay, best shape of their life, any of that stuff. But I would say, like, one of my biggest critiques about Harrison as a rookie, I'm like, guy's got to get stronger and he's got to play more physical. Well, he's at least been eating the right food. Okay, so step in the right direction so far. From a fantasy perspective, he's wide receiver 19 in consensus rankings. We're in line with that wide receiver 20 at Yahoo. I don't know, Andy. I'm not sure that he has like that much upward mobility, but I also can't see him falling like any lower than wide receiver 20. So he's definitely, again, like, even if we're just watching him stay at this same spot, I think that's critical to sort of the discussion about Harrison and what he did last year and what he might be in an encore season where, other than his guns, a lot of variables have not changed here for Harrison this year. He's still the same player, still the same quarterback, still the same offense, and we don't really know what the role is going to be after an unimpressive role in his rookie season.
Yeah, any indications that the role is going to change, that his usage will change a little bit, that we will, that Marvin Harrison is going to be asked to do a little bit more, could move the needle a little bit. That said, it's not going to move it so much that like we get him to where he was last year, because people are just going to feel so burned by him and all that he didn't do as a rookie, that nobody's going to allow themselves to put him inside the top 12 wide receivers. I don't think that's going to happen. I think he's an interesting conversation though, because and I know I've mentioned this before, but there was a time not that long ago when we simply did not expect almost any, certainly fantasy relevant production from wide receivers in their first year, their second year. And there was a time when we would, we could excuse a 22-year-old receiver who wasn't immediately dominant, no matter how good he had been at the college level. And that, obviously things have changed. That's, things changed 10 years ago. So we're definitely in an era where we see wide receivers step in and produce monster seasons. We've seen it back to back years, right? Like, it keeps happening. But it doesn't mean that everybody has to develop along the same timeline. And he wasn't even bad last year necessarily. It was just, just a little bit disappointing. Like, I don't want to, it's not like he can never have a Brian Thomas season. Like, Marvin Harrison Jr.'s college career really happened. Like, all that really happened. He really was that good. He cooked some very good corners at Ohio State. Like, that all still counts, and that all should still factor into your opinion of him. It doesn't, he didn't just like shake the Etch-a-Sketch last year and all that matters is what he did as a rookie. It matters more. And I do think it says something that, like, whatever we think he was capable of coming into last year, the Cardinals, who saw him every day, said, no, this is what we want to ask you to do. I think that matters. And it might be an indication, not just that they're, we don't always have to, our immediate reaction shouldn't always be, oh man, this team is dumb. Sometimes they just see a player every day and they recognize what that guy is ready to do best. And that's all they ask him to do. And that's probably fine when we're talking about a 22-year-old. Like, this is a really young player. And, just looking at his Yahoo projection, this seems totally reasonable to me. 70, 1,007. That's attainable for him. This is a monster talent. He could be a little bit better than that too.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think just, we've already got it started with the, hey, I've gained some muscle. And, if we get some training camp reports, they're lining up Marvin Harrison Jr. in the slot. Like, I do think that ADP actually could maybe come up a little bit, but it's not going to get close. I agree with you to where he was last year. He was the first rookie wide receiver drafted last year. The first rookie wide receiver drafted this year, competing with Travis Hunter, kind of depending on where you view him, is Tyrone McMillan out of Carolina. Andy, consensus ranks are wide receiver 30. We range here at Yahoo 27 to wide receiver 41, which is a pretty big gap there. I think that McMillan, wide receiver 30, like, that's a bet that I want to make in drafts this year. And I really don't know what I'd need to see over the course of the offseason. Like, maybe if he has a great training camp and like we get real high on Bryce Young, maybe he could jump up a little bit. But a lot of the names that we're showing on the screen right now that he's in the range of, like, I don't know that he jumps ahead of, like, maybe some of these guys like Williams and Olave and Addison, but I kind of think he parks around this range, and I think this is a really good range for him to go in.
I think it's probably the right range. I think he can leapfrog Odunze, certainly. I think he can, I don't know, depending on how we're feeling about the Saints offense generally, I think he can leapfrog Olave. I don't see how he doesn't finish with 120, 125 or more targets. That team was crying out for somebody with his skill set. They landed, if not the best receiver in the draft class, certainly a top 3 receiver in the draft class, I think. Bryce Young was awesome at the end of last year. Like, there's just a lot of tailwinds here. Like, he landed in a really, really good spot. I realize we don't think of Carolina as being, that's a prime spot for fantasy production. As well as Bryce Young was playing for half a season last year, the second half of the season. Like, I don't know. I feel really good about somebody that Bryce Young is going to target 120 times.
Yeah, and I'm interested. I'm actually more interested to hear about like the rest of the Carolina receivers in training camp. Like, Jalen Coker cemented a role. Like, do they see Adam Thielen as still a guy that's going to inhale a ton of volume? Like, Xavier Legette, is he moving back to that flanker position, or like what's his status in the hierarchy here? Because McMillan, I do view as entrenched as the number 1 X receiver, but maybe that's something that I should investigate a little bit more. Maybe that's not the way it's going to go. But they drafted him 8th overall. He's a very good prospect, and I think he does fit this offense and fits what they needed in the wide receiver room so well that right now, again, as we sit here in May, I'm open to new information, but as we sit here in May, I have a tough time not imagining him just locking down that role for this team. Last wide receiver we're going to talk about today, last player we're going to talk about today is Chris Godwin, who consensus ranked wide receiver 31. We're actually higher at Yahoo, mostly because of me, because I have him ranked rather high, which is something I certainly need to investigate, because he's a guy, Andy, that I think has a huge range of outcomes ADP wise, and it's really all health related, because if he's going to be on the field week 1, this was one of the most productive receivers in football in the first 7 weeks of the season. And I know they drafted a first-round receiver. Jalen McMillan finished the season strong, so maybe those are more variables that we should discuss. But if he's healthy, I have a hard time thinking he doesn't just belong higher than wide receiver 31. But again, the health is a huge factor here.
Yeah, he was the wide receiver 2 overall in fantasy at the time of his injury last year. He's and every week was really good. Like, every week was useful. He wasn't the wide receiver 2 because he had like one supernova week and everything else was kind of a mess. He was perfectly consistent. And I think we all like Baker Mayfield. I think we all like this offense. It strictly comes down to health. And, I can tell myself a story where like Egbuka was their pick because they just don't want to be in a situation like they were last year ever again, where like one of these guys goes down and then all of a sudden we're building the offense around Cade Otton. But I like the other possibility there is that they are just not happy with where they think Chris Godwin is in his recovery. And that is a little bit worrisome. They also, I always come back to the fact that, we were seeing interviews with Chris Godwin last December where he was talking about how, if this playoff run goes deep enough, I'm coming back. Like he was, I don't know, he was going to be on the field in the postseason if they were playing even one more game, I think. So I'm kind of cautiously optimistic about the recovery. Some of that is maybe just hopefulness, right? Like I want to see last year's version of Chris Godwin again over a full season. That'd be awesome. He was going to finish with 1,300, 1,400 yards, a bunch of touchdowns. He was going to be a big part of that Baker Mayfield explosion. So at the high end, this is like a top 5 fantasy receiver, and as long as he's healthy, I don't really think there's any way that he slips outside the top 25.
And they re-signed him. And, Emeka Egbuka doesn't have to be like a referendum on where they view Godwin's health. I think these two guys can work together. The idea that, Egbuka only played in the slot. Well, Jalen McMillan only played in the slot in college, and it was an inspired move to kick him to the outside to be a flanker in their system. So, like, they can see all of these guys as part of their future because Evans is 32, and Godwin is coming off a serious injury. But again, if he's healthy, I certainly want to be higher than wide receiver 39 or whatever. So I'm very interested to track his just basically health progress over the next few months.
This is probably the cleanest one of anyone that we're talking about here because all we really need is proof of concept, right? As long as Chris Godwin demonstrates that he's healthy and he's not, he doesn't have to miss every third practice, something like that. If he's just on the field all the time, he's all of a sudden going to vault into like the top 15.
Yeah, but I will say, though, just the devil's advocate or maybe just the word of caution there is that like sometimes summer injury optimism can lead us astray, the word of Scott Pianowski is always in my head when I think about that. So, just either way, like that progress is going to determine the ADP. And I want to be in on that, but I'm at least going to give myself some out there in terms of a word of caution before diving all the way in on a player coming off an injury as he heads into this point in his career. But Andy, at this point of your career, you're crushing it, deep into your career. You've always been crushing it. Deep. I appreciate you doing this with me, buddy. Next time we talk, we are going to be doing the Quarterback Wilderness Show, Andy. That's going to be fun. I don't think you're going to be a part of that because you've got, what do you got? Like vacations? You've got baseball coming up. What are you doing to celebrate Memorial Day?
We got things. Actually, Scott Pianowski just hosted a from scratch fantasy baseball draft last night. It was fun. We've got some content coming out over the next few days about sort of re-ranking and reconsidering the baseball landscape. I love coming on these off-season podcasts though, because again, I don't have to I can disavow anything that I say and it's fine, right? Because training camps haven't even opened yet. We're just spitballing here. That's it's the best time of year for football content. Nobody's paying attention to it. Maybe that's why it's so appealing. But man, this is the best time of year when we have free range and nobody is, there's no accountability in May. I love that.
Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah, it's just, hey, these are things to monitor, not things that we're sure about yet. And that is a glorious time of the football calendar. Again, that is going to do it for today's show. Remember, we are down to one show a week, so we will not be back in your feed until next Wednesday, but it's a really fun episode coming in there. We're going to dive into the pass catchers that are now in or out of the quarterback wilderness after a lot of shuffling. Hey, maybe we'll even know if Aaron Rodgers is going to sign with the Steelers. I really don't care at this point, but maybe it's something we'll know by then. I feel like DK Metcalf, by the way, is always involved in the quarterback wilderness discussion, whether he's in, whether he's out. So he's always a highlight player. We will certainly be talking about him and many other players on that show next week. But until then, we are out.